Good afternoon, my name is Andrew Bennett. I'm the wine buyer for 3D Wines. Welcome to the first of our tastings, our video tastings. We're going to do a quick tasting today of a fantastic vintage. It's the 2009 vintage in Burgundy, and in particular we're going to concentrate on our Nuits-St-Georges, les Plantes Barons, from Domaine Dubois. So this is a village Nuits-St-Georges from what was a fantastic Burgundy vintage. So if you like to have a look at the label before we start. So, Nuits-St-Georges is, if you can see the map here, it's up to the north of Beaune. Burgundy is effectively separated by the Côte de Nuits in the north and the Côte de Beaune in the south, with Beaune as its sort of capital in the middle. That's what they call the Côte d'Or, and we're concentrating in the Côte de Nuits region. And Nuits-St-Georges is a big, sprawling appellation. 40 to 50% of the vineyard area are actually rated as Premier Cru, and lots of different soil types, lots of different individual terroirs. A little bit of hills, a little bit of flat, a little bit of stony, marl and limestone. And it's very difficult to actually encapsulate in words what the style is, because it's such a big area. But our Domaine Dubois, are based at the southern end in a village called Primo-Prissy. And this particular vineyard, the Plantes Barons vineyard, and this wine is made exclusively from that vineyard for our partners at 3D, is at the southern end, and the wines from that area tend to have, the vines are planted more in clay, so the wines tend to be a little bit more sturdy and a little bit more tannic, whereas the wines further to the north, up to Vosne-Romanée, tend to be a little bit less, there's less clay in the soil, so the wines tend to be a little bit more elegant and easier to drink early on. But that's the general rule. But in essence, there's been a lot of changes occurring in the appellation and in Burgundy in general, with younger winemakers coming in, like the Dubois, who are making their wines in a different style and making Nuits-St-Georges now much more approachable and much easier to drink earlier on, than having to put them, as traditionally was the case, into your cellar for 10, 20 years in order to mature and develop. So Domaine Dubois is a domain of 23.5 hectares, which is pretty big. They're partly a negociant as well, and they have some fantastic holdings throughout the whole of the northern part of Burgundy, including Vosne-Romanée, Chambolle-Musigny, Nuits-St-Georges, and they even have some parcels in the southern part in Meursault, for example. So some really top names, top appellations. And the young duo, brother and sister duo, Béatrice and Raphael, took over the domain in 2006 from their father, and Beatrice is a winemaker, and Beatrice has travelled in the southern hemisphere, made vintages in Chile, in Australia, and spent quite a lot of time in the south of France making wine as well, and has come back to the domain with fresh ideas, lots of she's introduced lots of new ways of doing things, and in particular she's introduced ways of making the wine in a much gentler, softer style, gentler macerations, gentle fermentations, and also using some very high quality coopers for their barrels. They use 7 different barrel types. And the wines now, with also with a philosophy for minimal handling and less chemicals and sprays in the vineyard, I would say that the wines now are as good as they have ever been at Domaine Dubois, and they are the 7th generation, so they've been going very, very long time. So let's have a look at the Nuits-St-Georges 2009. Why was 2009 such a good vintage? Well, it was uniformly very, very good throughout the Côte d'Or. By virtue of, first of all, very, very cold winter, which helped to restore the vines. In fact, it was a little bit too cold in the northern parts towards Dijon, around Gevrey-Chambertin. There were many vines that were killed off with the sudden frosts. But in general, good cold winter, a warm spring, and then a long hot summer which led right through the autumn into harvest time. So the grapes came in extremely healthy, with very, very good levels of ripeness. And that made the job of the winemaker a lot easier. Very little sorting was required. And the first thing we notice about 2009 is, when you pour it into the glass, is the colour. Most of the 2009s have an amazingly deep colour. Remember, this is Pinot Noir, and that is, you know, deepish purple ruby in colour. Very, very good colour for a Pinot Noir, and that's typical of 2009. And then give it a few swirls and a sniff. It's very typical of the Nuits-St-Georges. If we go back to how do we define, that question of how do we define Nuits-St-Georges, certainly there's you know, lots of black fruit on the nose, and this one in particular shows a lot of the sort of black cherry on the nose at the moment, which you also associate with wines a little bit further north in Gevrey-Chambertin. And in a sense, Nuits-St-Georges and Gevrey-Chambertin share very much the same sort of personality. But it smells good. It smells fresh, it smells a little bit leafy, but it smells ripe and lovely sort of black fruits, a little bit of black currant and blackberry, and then just the faintest whiff of oak. There's about 25% new oak here, but it's not that evident at the moment on the nose, which is good. It's nicely integrated. And then also a little bit of floral. There's minerality there, but also a little sort of touch of violets, dried violets there, which is also a sort of telltale sort of trait of the Nuits-St-Georges. Okay, so on the palate. Again, lovely freshness. Very much alive on the palate. Modern, very rounded, absolutely delicious. There's quite a lot of licorice and spice there. But, you know, Pinot Noir is a great variety. It's very much about the texture in the mouth. And rather than the sort of initial fruit flavours and any oak there is, that might be there. And this is sort of very rounded on the palate. With that lovely fresh juicy acidity, and then you can feel towards the back the oaky character, the spiciness from the oak and the sort of toastiness from the oak. For me, what's impressive about it is it's got this you know, lovely balance. Some of the 09s were very late picked and suffered from too much alcohol. Here this is not the case. Picked at the right time, you've got that nice balance of the fruit, which in this case is a black cherry, cerise, or even griotte as the French say, the little dark cherries, and some nice oak, creamy oak as well, and that lovely juicy acidity that works its way all the way through the wine like a backbone, making the wine nice and sort of a pleasure to drink early on. Fantastic. Really nice now, but with a reasonable tannic structure, a nice acidity and lots of fruit. This is a wine that will certainly age for a decade or more, which is not untypical of a Nuits-St-Georges, village Nuits-St-Georges. So absolutely delicious, and that lovely creaminess, that sort of mocha character, coffee and cream, really lingers on the palate. It's something I really like, and it's very much, again, a hallmark of the 2009 vintage. So, top effort, Beatrice. You can tell it's a lady winemaker. It's got lovely elegance, nice freshness, and that would be fantastic typically with Côte de Boeuf or some lamb, where that freshness cuts through the fattiness of the lamb. So, all in all, really nice effort and very typical of the 2009 vintage. So, if you haven't bought some already, please do. Thank you very much.